Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast. I am so excited today. I know I say that all the time, but I'm really excited. Someone I really admire, someone I really adore professionally as a writer, as an inspirational witch. She's just amazing. The fantastic Deborah Blake. Let me tell you a little bit about Deborah. She is an author of over a dozen books on modern witchcraft, including the Little Book of Cat Magic, which I love, and Everyday Witchcraft, as well as the acclaimed Everyday Witch Tarot and Oracle decks, which I have and use all the time. She's also written 3 paranormal romance and urban fantasy series for Berkley, and her new cozy mystery series launches with Furbidden Fatality in 2021. Deborah lives in a 130-year-old farmhouse in upstate New York with her numerous cats who like to supervise all of her activities, both magical and mundane. Deborah, I am just ridiculously excited to be looking at your face. For those of you who are listening and not watching, I have a video going, which you could see on YouTube after this episode airs. I can't stop smiling looking at you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I'm really happy to see you too.
I mean, how long has it been since we've actually been in the same physical space?
Oh my God, years and years. Because you were you came to the fairy festival near me, right? Was that where saw you first?
Is that where we met for the first time? New York Fairy Festival? And
I think so. Yeah,
Binghamton?
I think that, because I remember walking in the gates and yours was one of the first booths I saw, and I went, oh my God, that's Dawn from Cucina Aurora. And then I bought all your orals, and I bought this,
which was
your first little cookbook, and I can prove it because it's
I signed it for you. Okay, so that little cookbook, okay, thank you. I self-published it through like an online self-publishing company. And then it became like way too expensive to continue to do through that. So I took the raw files and I had them printed at my printer. And that's how I used to like sell it. I used to just print it and sell it and whatever. But that became like crazy expensive too. So now that book is out of print, my dear.
I know, it's my precious copy.
Out of print. I have been able to repurpose some of the recipes in there. There's maybe 1 or 2 that's in my new book that I pulled from there because they were appropriate for the new book. There's the strawberry cheesecake. It's a good one. It's in that first book. And that I put in the new book. But that book doesn't exist anymore. So good on you. I'm thinking about like making it an online only like PDF, but I have no fucking idea how to do that. So I don't.
Yeah, no, I get that. I outsource that stuff. You know, when I decide to self-publish, I have somebody else do the formatting and all of that kind of thing, and somebody else handles my website, because
that's smart.
I'm too tired, and the learning curve is too high, and I have books to write, and I can either write a book or I can learn how to do my own website. And guess what? Plus I have a great, virtual assistant who like can do it bing, bing, bing. And I just go, here, put this on there, make this go away, and she just does it and bills me like $15. It's not,
that's actually a really great idea. I've had people ask, like, can they get that book? They want to see the original version of the book. And I'm like, no, sorry, but that's a really great idea. Maybe
I think you should put it back out. I love it.
Oh, I know. It's still like when you look at that one and then you look at the new one, which is look at this, that's a hardcover book.
That is gorgeous.
I'm going to send you one.
Who did the cover for that?
So, my new book, A Kitchen Witch's Guide to Love and Romance, is produced or published through Tiller at Simon & Schuster. And all the artwork, all the illustration, this is actually done by my amazing friend, Betsy Campbell. And she's a friend back from New York.
Gorgeous.
She did all the illustrations. She's really, let's see if I can pull up some of the illustrations. Her illustrations are just...
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah, she's just amazing. I was really lucky because I was able to, this interview is supposed to be about you, not about me. I was really lucky because Simon and Schuster, they said like, hey, listen, we want you to have creative control of this project. So they let me pick my own artists. So they're like, I was like, I have an illustrator, I have a photographer, these amazing women in my life that I love working with. So I was able to do that.
Which is very rare for people watching this who don't work in publishing. Most of the time you have very little, as an author, you have very little control. Sometimes they'll give you sort of veto power. Like they'll send you the cover and they'll go, what do you think? And you can go, could you change that part in the bottom that's not, but yeah, to be able to get your own artist. I actually was very lucky with my upcoming book, which the reason look, doesn't it remind you a little bit of your cover?
So the new book, and I really want to talk in depth about it later, but Deborah's new book is
reverse.
Eclectic Witches Book of Shadows. And we're going to talk about
wisdom at your fingertips.
Witchy wisdom at your fingertips. This is really an exciting book. I really want to talk about it a little bit later on, but
so my illustrator for this was Mickey Mueller, and she was, she's done illustrations for like all mine's from Llewellyn, and she's done a lot of their, other sort of things. And this is my first fully illustrated book. I wish I had a sample. It's not back from the printer yet. It's going to be glorious.
Yes.
I mean, it's just, and she did the most amazing illustrations inside. That was what I wanted. I wanted a book of shadows that felt like somebody had been drawing in it.
Yes. Now you've been writing books for, your whole life. I think about me coming into witchcraft or finding my path.
Believe it or not, my first book didn't come out till after I was 40.
I feel like I have been reading your work since I found the path.
Well, I was 40 a long time ago.
No. So like at least 20 years more?
Yeah, my first book from Llewellyn came out in 2007. That was Circle Coven and Grove. Yeah, 2007. And I've done on average a book a year for them since then, plus usually a novel. It took me a few more years to get the fiction career up and running.
Sure.
So I was writing a novel at the same time as I was writing the fiction, but we were sending them out and people were going, well, or worse.
It takes time, right? I think also you're saying people that don't work in publishing or people that don't write books, this is something that I've talked about a bunch of on my video blog, and just like, whatever your idea is, just keep fucking going. Like, just keep trying. You're gonna get told no a bazillion times, but you only need to be told yes once.
Right. And I was very fortunate with the Llewellyn books because I did get a yes on my first book.
Whoa.
There's actually a very funny story.
Tell it. I can't wait to hear it.
So Circle Coven and Grove, here, let me grab a copy so people can see it who are able to see it. So this was my first book with Llewellyn, Circle
Coven and Grove.
And it's a book for covens. Basically, it had a year of magical practice, full moons, new moons, Sabbaths, and some advice and things like that. And so I was a newbie to publishing, and I went to the Llewellyn website because you should always follow their instructions, whoever it is you want to try and
their submission. They have submission guidelines. Follow their guidelines, or you're not getting through the door.
Exactly. And I swear to this day that one of the reasons that I got published was because I was one of like 1,000 people to submit, and one of 3 who actually followed the instructions.
Yes.
That's the kind of girl I am.
Yes.
So, they said to send, I think it was like the first 50 pages and an outline and a summary. And, there were a bunch of other requirements. And so I wrote the first, 3 chapters or whatever it is. And they said, usually it takes, anywhere between 2 months and 6 months to get a response back. And, which is pretty typical.
Yeah.
And, they said, do not be surprised not to hear anything for 6 months. And I said, okay, I've been working on this for a while. I'm going to put it down, go work on some other things, and I'll come back and finish it. And my editor, Alicia Gallo, who is now a really good friend of mine, had just started at Llewellyn and had what she later called an eerily empty desk, which has never happened since. And so what happened was the book showed up on her eerily empty desk. She read it right away. And 2 weeks later, she sent me a message that said, I really like this. I would like to see the rest of the book. There was no rest of the
Oh,
book.
crap.
I'm like, but you said 6 months. Oh my God. And I actually wrote the rest of the book in 5 weeks.
Oh
Which is
my
insane.
goodness.
I could not reproduce that now if you held a gun to my head. I was so excited.
Wow.
And then I sent it in and waited 6 months to hear back again, because by then she didn't have an eerily empty desk.
Right.
Luckily, she loved it, and the rest is history. But
Wow.
yeah, it was one of those very strange. Obviously the gods were trying to
Right.
encourage me.
Isn't it
And
funny how those things they happen and we're always like, oh my goodness, it's so weird that this happened. And I'm like, when you step back, you're like, well, obviously that's how it happened,
right.
because it was supposed to
Well,
happen that way.
and the gods had basically told me to write this book, so
Right.
they were saying, yes, we told you. I said, just do it.
Yes.
And for me, the interesting thing about this was I had wanted to be a fiction writer my whole life. I mean, literally since sixth grade math class, when I was scribbling in my notebook behind the book. But I'd never finished anything. And so finishing this Llewellyn book meant I no longer had the excuse. I couldn't say, oh, well, I never finished anything. So I basically said to myself, okay, witchy, get off your butt and now write a novel.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, there was a lot of hand of the gods in this, all over the place. And then my fiction stuff, for again, those who are not familiar with publishing, you really have to have an agent. I mean, there are people who make it without one, but to get your foot in the door, most places, Llewellyn will not require you to have that.
Yeah.
Most other publishers will.
Yeah.
And in order to get an agent, you write a book, you send it out, they reject it, you send it to 67 rejections is what I got before I got my agent. So for people who are thinking, oh, I've sent my idea out twice and nobody likes it, don't give up at twice.
Don't give up.
Don't give
All
up
right.
at 50.
So you wanted to be a writer your whole life.
I did. Yeah.
And did it take and it took until that first book at Llewellyn. So what were you doing beforehand? How did you get to that point? And were you always writing like short stories for yourself? Well, were you always a storyteller? Were you always someone who imparted wisdom and
I was a very insecure teenager. I mean, I had no ego at all. Yeah, I know. It's just like, sat in the corner wearing all black. And if anybody said boo to me, I'm like, oh, they hate me. I'm going to go like.
Oh, so you were emo before it was cool.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I started emo. They just didn't realize it. Except I didn't have the black lipstick. No, I just wanted to fade into the corner.
Right.
See,
can I just disappear? Yes.
Yeah. But anyway, so I would go through periods of time, starting with my teen years, where I would write a short story or a couple of short stories, send it out. At that point, there were magazines like Asimov's Amazing Stories and things like that. I wrote a lot of science fiction and fantasy back then. And, I would get a couple of rejections and I would give it up for years. And then, in my early 20s, I tried it again and I got a couple of rejections and I gave it up for years. I have many started stories. So it really, until the day that I wrote this book, and I had no intention whatsoever of having a nonfiction career. That was not in the plan at all. What happened was I had been practicing for, I guess, 5 years or so with my original group, and went to my high priestess and said, okay, I think I'm ready to move on to the next level. We weren't formal Wiccan in that we didn't have the the 1, 2, 3 levels, but she did have me do she had been taught Wiccan, and so she had me do the year and a day of practice as a high priestess. I led our group, I led some public things, and then I left that group for reasons having nothing to do with that, and waited 9 months, found a couple of people, started my own group, which is Blue Moon Circle, which, believe it or not, started in 2004. And so we just at at Beltane celebrated our 21st anniversary, which
Wow.
does not often happen. And the core members are still there. We've had other people who've come and gone. We've sort of transmuted. And I actually have a secret to tell you. Yeah, I know. But we'll get to that in a minute. And so I wished that I had this book for that first year of being a new high priestess that gave me all of these rituals. And so I didn't have to worry about coming up with them. And that, said, well, here's the rules for the circle. You can hand them to people as they come in. And here are some suggestions. Do this, don't do this. Here's, like a list of real quickie, like here's the, the stuff for, if you're going to work on love magic, here's some stones and some herbs, basic stuff like that. And after I had been doing the group for a year, I said something to somebody about how I, wished I had a book like that. And they said, oh, you write the best rituals. And I said, oh, anybody can do that. And they went, no, everybody can't do that. And I went, huh. And I was in the shower, which is where I get
all my ideas in the shower. Yes. Or shower. Driving. Yes.
And I was in the shower, and I was just sort of thinking about that, and I was letting it go in my head. And I went, okay, so this thing that is easy for me is not easy for everybody else. And there was this book I wanted and I couldn't find. Maybe I should try writing the book. And that was definitely, the gods going, yo, And so at that point, my intention literally was to write, this one book,
right?
And then, try the fiction stuff. And only then I got another idea. and 13 books later, and I keep saying, Alicia now just laughs at me because I say, I'm pretty sure this is the last one because I have no more ideas. I don't know what I could possibly write about that I haven't covered in, the Little Book of Cat Magic or Everyday Witchcraft. And then I'll get one more idea, like this Book of Shadows. I went, oh, I've never done a Book of Shadows. That would be kind of cool. But I really want to do like a cool illustrated, personalized kind of thing. They'll never let me do it. And they all went, no, that's a great idea. So I thought, people are always asking me for, how do I start my own coven? Where can I find a coven? Can I join your coven? No, you can't. Sorry. It's a mostly closed. We occasionally meet somebody who seems like the right fit, but it's not, we're not online, none of that. And so I had for many years been recommending Circle, Coven, and Grove and, a couple of other books. And it finally occurred to me this year that my practice over all of these years, since 2004, when I started this group, I'm not the same witch I was. I'm not the same leader. The group is not the same. The witchcraft community and the way people practice is not the same. I now consider myself to be an eclectic witch, hence the eclectic witches Book of Shadows. I have Wiccan leanings because that was how I was taught. I still call the four quarters the same way, I always did for the most part. But, a lot of my practice is much more eclectic. And, I have a friend who practices with one other person. That's her group. Her group is 2 people. It's not 13. It's not 20. I have my stepdaughter, who is also a pagan. She has a sort of a free-floating group of friends who are pagans, and whoever is available at any given holiday or whatever, when they feel like getting together, somebody puts out the call, they figure out what they're going to do. It's much more informal. And I said, I should update this. I should put out a new version. So I just signed a new contract with Llewellyn for the Modern Eclectic Witches Coven, Magic for 2 or more.
Awesome.
Heard it here first.
Wow, heard it here first.
Yeah,
that's so cool. And you're 100% right, because things evolve, the communities change, the communities evolve. I call myself the kitchen witch, but like in reality, I'm probably more of what would be defined as a neo-pagan because I bring in so many different elements from so many different pantheons, so I can't just say, oh, I'm a witch, or oh, I'm a Wiccan, because I'm not, I'm everything.
Well,
but that term witch is just so, witch pagan, it just kind of encompasses everything.
And I call myself all sorts of things. I mean, I tend not to call myself Wiccan specifically anymore, because, I use it sometimes with people for whom that term is going to be the most recognizable or comfortable.
Yes.
If people are talking about religion and I say pagan and their eyes are like, what? I'll say, like a Wiccan, and they'll go, oh, whereas, with some people I can say witch and they'll understand what that means.
Absolutely.
I usually add wicked, but
I'm really interested in the fact that it's going to sound great, that you've only been writing for 20 years, because you don't think of like only 20 years, but now, and from what you said before, that you had been practicing for a few years prior to your first writing, 4 years, 5 years, something like that.
Yeah, I've actually been practicing, let me think. So 5 years with the first group, 9 months on my own, and then a year with my second group. So 6.5, no, it was more than 5 years. So 6.5 years probably with my first group, and 9 months by myself. And then, a year with my group. So there was an extended period where I practiced and read a lot of other people's books.
Sure.
In fact, I could show you my collection of a lot of other people's books. So I have a whole cabinet full of various sundry, witchcrafty kinds of books.
So was that at that time, that was you just coming to the path at that time? Were you, so in your teens, your early 20s, you would not have identified as pagan at that time?
Absolutely not. No.
Was there anything in your life before you found the path that sort of, I mean, you had said that you were writing your whole life, you were always into fantasy and science fiction and that sort of thing, that sort of maybe influenced or gave you a little tickle at the back of your brain that maybe this kind of path was where you were headed? Can you talk a little bit about like who you were before and how you got here?
It is sort of funny because when I went to my first ritual, which was at Samhain, and it was, by this woman I knew who kept inviting me to things, and I kept
she's looking at you and going, "You're a witch, honey. You're a witch," and you're like, "No."
The witches around me knew long before I knew.
Sure, they did.
After I went to this, and I went to a friend of mine and said, "I can't believe it, I'm a witch," and she went, "Yeah, I knew that." And I went, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And she said, "Because you weren't ready yet." And I went, "Oh, okay, that makes sense." But so I kept getting invited to this, person's house, and I'm like, don't like people. This is, but when I finally went to the ritual and, reached out and felt the gods reach back and everything clicked into place, I said, "Oh, I've been this all along. I just didn't know there was a name for it."
Yes.
And I just got goosebumps. I mean, it's literally one of those things where that first ritual, I knew I was in the right place. I had been searching my whole life. I mean, I was brought up Jewish, and I love the heritage. I'm very proud of you. I mean, look at this nose. Very proud of being Jewish, but the religion itself, very male dominated, traditional, yada, yada.
It just didn't feel like it fit you.
Oh, no, absolutely not. It did not resonate one tiny little bit. And, I went to the Unitarian Church for a while when I was younger and married, and it was nice. The people were very pleasant, but it just also didn't really click. It was still a little too Christian for me. And it was not, there was something missing. It didn't have the right level of spirit for me. And then I studied Buddhism and Taoism for a number of years, and I loved them. And they did form a lot of my psychological, spiritual stuff, but there was no deity. There was no connecting, there was a general connection. And I was looking for that. I didn't even know if I believed it existed. I probably would have said I was an agnostic until the day I stood in that first circle and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and went, "Well, it's about time."
Right. That's so interesting because I similarly grew up in a very Italian Catholic family, right? Again, talk about the schnazzola. You see that this is my Sicilian is right here, in my the little nose bump is my Sicilian.
And it looks beautiful on you.
Thank you, thank you. But that very male dominated, that very stringent rules, and you have to do this and stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, sit down. You know, all of that, and then finding
if you don't fit into the mold,
if you
you're bad. That was part of what got to me about that.
The badness of it, like, and you have to like constantly atone for the fact that you're different, and at the same time, you know, in you know, like what we were learning was like, God loves you and made you just the way you are.
Yeah, you're perfect, except you're gonna have to change this.
Except you're gonna have exactly. So very confusing, and it just like I said, never felt like you were wearing someone else's coat. Like it's kind of keeping you warm, but it doesn't fit right, you know. And then, you know, finding my path you know, I was practicing as a pagan before, a couple of years before I realized I was a kitchen witch. And similarly to you, I had that like lightning bolt moment where I opened a book on kitchen witchery, opened that up and went, oh crap, this is what I am. I had no idea there was a name for this. I had no idea that that this was a thing, you know. And it's so interesting because we do find the path. We don't wake up one day and go, I think I want to do this. Right? It's like, oh,
well, and sometimes you have to be sort of nudged repeatedly in that direction.
Yes.
I was fairly resistant, in part because I didn't even, like you said, I didn't know this was a thing. I mean, I knew about Wicca, I knew, you know, but I did not realize what modern witchcraft looked like.
Yes.
And that it had my face on it. Yeah, I certainly did not expect to be a face of modern witchcraft. If you had told me that in the beginning, I would have laughed at you. You know, I would have been like, yeah, I'm going to write how many, what's that now? Oh, sure. You know, people are going to recognize my name.
Yeah.
It's really funny because
you're like kind of a big deal, Deborah. Like, sorry, like you're kind of a big deal.
I have a friend who has a pagan store, and he calls me a BNP, a big name pagan, and I'm like, no, I'm like a medium.
No, you're kind of a big name pagan. You're kind of like your everyday witch series, like your, you know, the book, and then the tarot and the oracle. I mean, what makes your work stand out to me is how accessible it is. And maybe that comes from the fact that the way you found your path, and like you said, you were writing these books, or especially your first book, you were writing the book as a newbie pagan going, God, I need a little help. And the fact is that those kind of, I don't want to use the word beginner books, but they're accessible to people that are pagan, that are non-pagan, that are beginners, but they're still relevant to people that are, you know, well into the craft. I mean, I think I have your first edition of the Everyday Witch book, and it's something that even now, after practicing for so many years, I refer back to. Right? I'm like, oh, what does Deborah say about that? Okay, let me just go back to that.
I'm that way with Dorothy Morrison's books and
right.
Scott Cunningham's, and I mean,
Scott Cunningham is like this perfect, I always look at Scott Cunningham's books as like encyclopedias. Like, oh, I just have a quick question, quick reference.
Exactly.
Boom, right?
I forgot what this herb was good for. Let me go look at the herb book.
I'm like, oh, I have all this shit in the fridge. What, you know, even as a kitchen witch, I'm like, oh, I totally forgot. What's rutabaga? I don't know. Let's look it up.
Exactly. You know? Yeah, especially with the weird, obscure ones.
Yeah,
and sometimes, you know, and I'm sure you've found this as a kitchen witch, sometimes as you form your own practice, you find that your associations with things don't match what's in the book.
100%.
And I always tell people this is, you know, and you're right about the accessible. That was my goal all along.
Yes.
I wanted my books to be like sitting around the kitchen table with your friendly neighborhood, you know, witch, sipping a cup of tea or a glass of wine, depending on what time of day it was.
Having a conversation.
And asking, you know, the questions and saying, well, you know, if I feel weird about this, should I still do it? You know?
Yeah.
And one of the things I say in every freaking book, people are probably really bored with it, is there are no right answers.
Yes.
You know, there are a couple of wrong answers. I mean, there are definitely things that I say to people, you have to make your own choices, but I'm going to tell you, I think this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And I don't suggest you do it.
Yeah.
Love spells, for instance, that have somebody's name particularly associated with them. Don't do it.
Right. Right.
But, you know, there are things like, you know, there may be something like cinnamon where the associations that were in the book were, you know, energy, healing, blah, blah, blah. I associate it because it's a fiery kind of thing, also associated with creativity. And that may not be in the book. So some of this stuff, as you practice, you're going to figure out what resonates with you and what your own inner gut says. And if it doesn't match a book, even a book you respect, that's all right. Just do what's right for you, because all of these people, they were following their guts. Their gut doesn't have to match your gut, you know, or maybe they were following an older tradition and things have shifted, the energies have shifted, you know, who knows? So,
so I, using the example of cinnamon, like as a kitchen witch, cinnamon for me is, yes, fiery, but it's also about warming of the home and comfort and, you know, bringing warmth and, you know, God, I'm lost for words. It's all about home, hearth, togetherness, you know, the way you feel when you walk into a kitchen that smells like cinnamon, or
right.
there's something,
if you smell apple pie on the stove, you go,
yeah.
To the point where realtors tell people to bake an apple pie and put it in the kitchen, because when people walk in the door of this house, they go, oh, this feels like home to me because it smells like cinnamon. So,
and right, exactly. So, you know, a lot of the times you're working with herbs or spices or foods or incense, and you're like, God, you know, this person said it's supposed to be this, but I feel this way. And then you're working in that energy. And that's okay. You know, I mean, the accessibility and the way that you write is so, it's like, you know, and this is, it's so great to talk to you, because I get the same kind of feedback where people say, when I read your writing, it feels like I'm having a conversation with you. And when I read your books, when I refer to your work, it always feels like I'm hanging out with Deborah. And for me, as someone, as a practitioner, not as a writer, not as a teacher, as a practitioner, that's the way that I best absorb information.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Right. So
I don't want to be lectured at. I don't want
I don't want to read stereo instructions.
Right. Well, and there are certain, I have a couple of authors who I really love and adore, whose books are very deep and make me, like, I can literally only read like
a page,
5 or 6 pages. Christopher Penzak, yeah, who, and don't get me wrong,
so much information.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Penzak has written some of the best books I've read, but they are not
formative works.
Right. And, you know, they're the things where you read 5 pages and then you have to take a week to think about it and take it in. And, you know, for better, for worse, those are not the kind of books that I write. I mean, hopefully they make you think, but they're more like, you know, the books where I would be sitting at the table with you and I'd go, did you consider that the reason you're doing this might be because of this, and that you're looking in the wrong place? And, you know, there's nothing complicated about that.
Yeah.
And part of it is, you know, my background. I have a degree in psychology, a degree in theater, perfect for a witch, right? And actually, I was a certified secondary English education teacher. So between the psychology and the teaching and the theater, which, let's face it, ritual is theater. So, you know, it turned out that I had the perfect, and I'd been writing my whole life. My mother was a librarian and a library director. So books were big in my family. There was never a family meal where somebody didn't jump up to check the World Book Encyclopedia for some kind of fact. That was before we all had phones, you know.
Right,
but
exactly.
Yeah, there was, you had to go look in an actual book. Yes, I'm old. Shut up.
No, dude, we had like the whole encyclopedia, not the Britannica, because my dad was a little too cheap for the Encyclopedia Britannica. We had like whatever was the cheap version
of the book, which I might have been that, but we loved it. It was great. You know, somebody'd say, you know, what state was Harriet Tubman in? And we'd be like, oh, Harriet Tubman.
Oh, look it up. Yeah.
So so for me, you know, my upbringing and my, you know, my education led me sort of accidentally to this. They were the perfect sort of stepping stones to this path. And the fact that I have always loved, digging in the earth. I grew up, my mom had a garden. Even when I lived in apartments, I would have like a pot with a tomato in it and a pot with some basil in it. And at my house where I am now, I have a huge garden, big raised beds. One of my favorite things to do is walk out my back door and clip fresh herbs for my dinner, because there is nothing like it. It's just, and yes, I love, walking through the woods, and the ocean makes my heart so happy. I'm nowhere near one, but when I get to go to them, and all of those things were part of my being a pagan, I just didn't realize it. The thing that was missing was the path and faith, which, for me, faith was a real struggle, because I came from a background of very rational, pragmatic people. I'm not a product of my environment in that way. I'm like the weird, changeling in a bunch of type A overachievers. But they think
all of those things, learning that you have a degree in psychology and you were a
sense
teacher.
when you
learn about that, you're like, oh, that really does make sense of the way you break things down and the way you connect with people. And and I agree with you. I think that there is, especially right now, there is a lot of work, there's a lot of books, there's a lot of content in the pagan community that is incredibly intense. It is super deep. It's getting into shadow work, it's getting into all kinds of
which is great if that's what you want.
And I think we all need that on, to deepen our practice, to get more in touch with our spirituality, to learn more and to go further. But at the same time, I feel like that's higher education, right? At the same time, you do need these, as you put, the everyday things.
And that's
that's where I get into like kitchen witchery and herbalism and these things that are a little bit more tactile, because they are your everyday practice that you can be doing while you are pursuing the higher education.
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
The book that I put out a few years ago, Everyday Witchcraft,
it is such a good book.
World. Well,
such a good book.
Everybody had the same complaint, including me, which is I don't have time to practice my spiritual practice. I'm working, a job, and I'm writing, and I'm taking care of the house and the cats and the garden and the yard, and trying to be, present for my friends and blah blah blah. Right. And I'm tired.
I'm fucking tired.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do was find ways, and this has been true from the very beginning, but this was my focus for this particular book. I wanted to find ways for people to integrate their spiritual practice with their daily life. If you only have 5 minutes, here's what you can do in 5 minutes. If all you can do is cook the dinner you were going to cook anyway, do kitchen witchery.
Correct.
You can integrate your spiritual practice that way. I mean, I probably am practicing formally less in the last couple of years than I have ever done in my life, partially because I couldn't see my group for a long time.
Right.
And partially because, I'm out of juice. I am like...
Right. And especially in a COVID world, right?
It's
I would go to big rituals at the Temple of Witchcraft a few times a year. They're right up the road from me. So, or I would be traveling for Cucina, Aurora, and I would happen to be going to events that were pagan in nature. And then we would also have a ritual and whatever. So kind of like blending.
Con out in California.
Yeah. And so you kind of... Sorry, you kind of get that, right?
I mean, you're missing that. And also, I think we are all in a very different headspace right now. Almost everybody that I know is struggling. They're just, the focus isn't there. We actually, my group and I got together a couple of times last year when the weather was warm enough that we could be outside wearing masks, distancing, which just felt odd, but we could at least be together. We didn't even do ritual. We didn't have the focus. We knew we didn't have it. We were together, and that was our ritual. And we had our feast. with the food all the way over there and everybody taking their masks down, putting it
Right,
out.
right.
But at least we did manage a couple of things, but we literally as a group did not have it in us to call on anything, to try and put anything out there. We're finally slowly, we did a little ritual for Beltane. Everybody was vaccinated, so we actually got to sit. We were still outside,
Great.
but no masks, no
Right.
distancing. I got a hug. Remember hugs?
That's amazing.
Oh my
Hugs.
God.
I remember hugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know what I like to do with my stuff is say, okay, be realistic about what you can and can't do, and don't kick yourself if
Yeah.
this month or this week or this year, you know, you only have this much space for your practice. I mean, it's in your heart. That's, you can never do a ritual for the rest of your life and still be a witch. For me,
Absolutely.
it's walking the path. It's how I do my day-to-day life, what I believe, you know, picking up garbage by the side of the road
Yeah.
because I love Mother Nature. That's being a witch. You know, to me, that's part of my practice, is walking my talk. And that doesn't necessarily require a formal ritual or
Yes.
casting the quarters or, you know,
Yes.
anything. You know,
100%.
I can
100%.
send out a prayer without having a candle lit. I can still just go, oh God and Goddess.
Well, it's how we walk through the world,
Yep,
right? I mean, it's
exactly.
the magic and the path is, when you do it with intention, it's everything we do. So it is, you know, when I'm making coffee in the morning, it is, you know, like you said, going outside and filling my bird feeders, you know. I mean, we're recording this at the time of Beltane. It's just past Beltane. I don't know when this episode's going to air, but for our purposes of this conversation, it was Beltane this past weekend. And Beltane is a huge holiday for me personally. Over the years I've been practicing, over 20 plus years, always I have something huge happening on Beltane, whether it is a gathering of friends in a park or traveling to a huge event where we do maypole
and it
and
is
ritual.
usually a group. It's a
huge,
group
right,
energy kind of
right.
holiday.
And obviously last year didn't happen, and I was much more like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And this year I was like, had it in my head that I'm going to at least create, you know, a picnic for my husband and myself. I'm at least going to do my own ritual cooking. I'm at least going to do this. I'm at least going to do that for myself. And like you said, I don't have the energy to do it. So I kind of like forced myself to get up early, made a bunch of food. I made like lemon cake and deviled eggs. And I made all this stuff. And by 2:00, it started raining. And now I'm super bummed. I can't be outside. It's cold and it's rainy in New England.
Did you have your picnic in the living room?
No, I took a fucking nap. I was like,
I am a huge fan of naps.
I was like super depressed, and I had used up all of my energy.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, why am I even bothering? You know, and then kind of like coming out on the other side and going, you know what? It's okay. Yesterday you spent time in the garden. You did cook this magically. You do have intention. It is okay that in this world, in the new world of, you know, COVID and how life, as we said in the beginning of this conversation, life changes, the environment changes, the community changes, we change. It is okay to forgive yourself for not being able to do everything that maybe you used to do, or that things that are out of your control. And the idea of working in a spiritual way, creating the sacred in every little, in the little moments of everyday magic is so, so important. I think that's why you and I kind of like grew.
If you don't have time to do
Exactly.
a whole reading, pull one card.
One
you can
card.
Still get an answer from one card. It was interesting this last year. Apparently, everybody who was stuck home in, you know, under COVID rules decided to learn how to read tarot, because I sold a lot of tarot decks.
Yes.
It was wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. And of course, my tarot deck is also meant to be accessible. It was based on the traditional Rider-Waite deck, and that one, Llewellyn actually asked me if I wanted to do one, and I at first I was going to go, oh, I'm too busy. I have this book.
You don't say no to that.
And then I went, I could have my own tarot deck. What am I thinking?
Yeah.
And then, you know, we ended up having so much fun, Elizabeth Alba, who's the illustrator, that we ended up a couple years later doing the Oracle deck, mostly as an excuse to work together again, because it was such a blast. But where's my?
I love the Oracle deck. I love it. You know, when I want to do, like you said, if it's a matter of, I need to do something quick, and if I could do a full reading, something that really long, it's the Everyday Witch Tarot and the Everyday Witch Oracle deck. I personally use the Oracle deck all the time. It is that thing where like I wake up every morning and I do 20 minutes of a yoga practice, and I'll do like a 5 or 10 minute meditation, and then when I'm done, I pull one card from that deck. And it's sort of like just it's a half hour to myself where I can go, okay, here's taking care of body, taking care of mind, and then taking care of spirit by pulling that one card and going, okay, just, hey, spirit, what do you need me to know? How should I,
and I love her illustrations are just
beautiful,
incredible,
absolutely gorgeous.
I was very fortunate because Llewellyn said, well, we have 3 or 4 people we've had on our list of people we wanted to work with. We're going to send you links to their websites. You can tell us which one you like the best. We can't guarantee anything. And I went to Elizabeth's website, and that was where I stopped. I just looked at her artwork, and I went, I kid you not, I wrote, please, 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 please get her. Please, I'm begging you. I will give you my firstborn child, whatever you want, just get this woman. And, it was very fortunate. It turned out we worked incredibly well together. We had a very good back and forth. I would say, okay, for, the Ace of Cups, I'd like to have a witch with a cup overflowing with blah, blah, blah. And this color cat's a lot of cats. A lot of cats in this deck.
As there should be.
As there should be. And, she would send me back a sketch, and I'd go, well, I kind of was thinking of this. And she'd either say, she'd fix it, or she'd go, well, this is what I was thinking. And sometimes I was thinking what is better than mine.
Sure.
And it was just the best collaborative experience ever. Mind you, it was a crap ton of work.
Yeah.
It took us the better part of 2 years, I think. And she had to paint all those paintings. I mean, complete painting for each tarot card, which is why when we got to the second thing, we went, how about 40? 40 is a good number for an order. 40. And we did make a very bad mistake on the first deck. We did. I love this deck. Everybody seems to love it, and we're very happy with it. But we were focused on being gender inclusive. I wanted to have, some pictures that were neutral so that they would resonate with anybody, kind of thing. And we kind of forgot the other kind of inclusive, and everybody in the deck is white, which is what you get when you get a white girl in upstate New York and a white girl in Massachusetts. And it wasn't, that wasn't where our head was. But when I started getting notes, and emails, and people said, oh, I feel left out. And we were all appalled. I mean, and Llewellyn was appalled. Nobody caught this. And part of it is because we're used to looking at decks where everybody's white. But then when we got the chance to do the Oracle, we said, we are going to fix this. And so we have, there are all sorts of people in here.
It's one of the things I love about it the most is that it looks like the world,
There's somebody who is not skinny.
I love it.
And we do have more, more of the gender neutral people. We have, but we have like Native American, and we have, this one, Transformation and Change, actually is based on a friend's daughter who was transitioning, and she was the inspiration for this.
It's such a beautiful, beautiful Oracle deck. I can't say enough about it. Like I said,
really, it's so, to me, it's just, and of course, all the pictures I'm looking for are
but it's like what you were saying, Deborah. It is the evolution of
here's
the
a
community.
Witch with tattoos. I know a lot.
We
of
all
witches
have
with tattoos. I don't. I barely have pierced ears, and I make jewelry. But
but it is the evolution.
It's
such a great
This is one of my very favorites.
It is such a great representation of what the community looks like now today, right?
I hope so. I think
absolutely. And that's important that as authors, as pagans, that our what we produce goes along with the way, you know, things evolve or are evolving in the world, in the community around us.
And one of the things that I've always loved about witchcraft, about paganism, is its inclusivity.
Absolutely.
You know, the fact that nobody would say to you, well, not nobody, there's always somebody, but in general, you were accepted for who you were, no matter how you identified,
Yes.
no matter how you dressed,
yes.
whether you had 1,000 tattoos or no tattoos,
yes.
whether you were, you know, male, female, or something else entirely.
Whatever you identify as.
I think a lot of people who are not accepted in other religions found their way to this spiritual path because they felt like they could be themselves and nobody was going to say, oh, you're a sinner. So we're all like, sin? What the heck? No, give me some more chocolate and let's just talk about this.
Right. So, all acts of love and pleasure are my ritual.
Exactly. And there was no, you can't have sex before, you know, I don't know, anything. You might not want to have sex after a very heavy meal, you know. But,
no, you need to wait 15 minutes or you'll get a cramp.
15 minutes, yeah.
All right, listen, we need to take a quick break and then I want to come back and I want to talk about your new project because it's super exciting, okay? We will be right back with the amazing Deborah Blake. Okay, so I've just paused the recording just so that we can have our little break. If you need to like run to the bathroom or get a drink.
And I'm going to, I'm like every hour on the hour. So
go,
yeah,
go quick. Yeah, and then we've got to do a wrap up.
Okay, perfect. Koshka. He's actually named after a character in one of my Baba Yaga novels who was a cat disguised as a dragon. And I figured if any cat was a dragon.
Oh, look at his little face.
Oh,
he's so fluffy.
He's very fluffy.
I just want to squish him.
Yeah,
oh my God.
Little fluffy belly. Yes.
Oh, he's so sweet.
Thankfully, he loves to get brushed because he's the first long hair cat I ever had. And I thought, oh, I'm in big trouble. I knew people had to shave the kitties, but nope, he will let me brush him till the cows come home.
Oh, what a sweetie.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You keep him with you.
We'll see if he'll stay.
If he stays. All right. So we're starting to run a little bit over. So I want to talk about the book. And then I have a final question and then we'll do a wrap up. Okay. Okay, my love, here we go. We are back with the amazing Deborah Blake and her kitty has joined us. Who is this kitty now?
This is Koshka.
For those of you just listening and not watching the video, he is the fluffiest black kitty with the greenest little eyes.
He's a rescue cat, so we don't know exactly. He's obviously part Maine Coon cat, but since he came from a 25 cat hoarding situation, he's undoubtedly not a purebred.
I just want to squish him.
Oh yeah, he's very squishable.
He looks like he's squishable. All right, so let's talk about your amazing new project, because this is, again, we've touched on it a little bit, but I really want to get in depth with it. The Eclectic Witches Book of Shadows. So it's both perfect for Wiccans and eclectic witches interested in building their own practices from the ground up. You say that it is a beginner-friendly guide and is modeled after a traditional book of shadows, but it's flexible so you can personalize it. So you were saying earlier that it's fully illustrated.
Oh, it's so pretty. I can't wait for everybody to see this. I still haven't seen it in person. I've just seen the mock-ups.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mickey Mueller did this incredible job of making it look as if you stumbled across this book that some witch had, hand painted, beautiful things. And yeah, there's crystals and there's herbs and it's so pretty. I just want to pick it up and kiss it like this kitty.
So really it's basically to, like you said, it's like a book of shadows that would be something that you would have tucked away, that's your collection of spells, rituals, ideas, crystals you've worked with, and things like that. So how would someone like me work with this book? What's your goal?
As I always say, any way you want to.
Love it.
Well, part of it is that it was designed so that people could start with what was there and then make it their own. There's blank pages where you can write your own notes. So, if you work with a certain herb, you can say, oh, well, this is, this worked with this magical spell, or it didn't work with this magical spell, or I actually had to substitute this thing and I liked it better, or these are my favorites that aren't listed in the book, that sort of thing. I mean, it's sort of a more personal way of getting the information that you'd otherwise be looking at a bunch of other books for. Different witches have different kinds of books of shadow, and not everybody has one. The book of shadows that I have for my group, Blue Moon Circle, that is actually pretty simple. It contains every ritual we ever did, contains actually photographs of trips we took together, because we're like a big family now. And some things like that, but it doesn't have all of these cool reference things. This is actually, as I was writing it, I was thinking, this is going to be really handy for me too, because I had to go look up things in a bunch of different sources, most of which, like, some of them, like, it was in this book of mine and that book of mine, and now it's all in one place. Yay!
Do you ever refer back to your own work? Like, I'm super embarrassed to say that, like, I use my own recipe books. I'm like,
I can't remember what I
can't remember how many tablespoons of whatever's supposed to go in there.
And there are a few recipes in there too, because what is a book of shadows without some recipes for feast days, or for cakes and ale, or that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of everything that I think you would want for a witchcraft practice. Again, simple. This is not the deep and complicated things. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be useful, because I'm all about the practical aspects. But it's also supposed to be beautiful and inspiring, and make you want to pick it up and just thumb through it and get ideas for things. And I think it's actually going to exceed my wildest dreams. When I recently went through the final proofs, I was just absolutely blown away.
Well, you tend to create books. You specifically tend to create books that you want, the things that are like, you're like, crap, I need this in my life, and you're like, okay, I've got to do it in my damn self, and I love that, because if it's something that you need, it's something that someone else needs.
And I think that's true. I mean, I call myself the everyday witch, because I do think I'm really, I'm not a professional witch in the way that some people are. They make their living at being a witch. They teach classes. They, they lead, large things. I'm a person who has an everyday life. I have a day job. I run an artist cooperative shop, which is possibly not a traditional day job, but, I am like everybody else out there. And so I write books that are for the average person. Not that any witches are average. We're all above average. But I write things that I hope will appeal to a broad spectrum of people. And this book especially, I mean, the subtitle is Witchy Wisdom at Your Fingertips. I wanted it to be like, ooh, I need to know what this thing does, or which stone I need for the healing work that I want to do. And I wanted it to just be an all-purpose, fun to use, but at the same time, beautiful, and you could make it into your own thing. There are places where you can draw pictures of, if you have any artsy inclinations at all,
or not at all, because it's yours.
It's
true. Your book of shadows. So whatever you want to scribble in there, and that's so great too, because I think we were talking about this before, like the hope is that someone will take this work and make it their own. It should be
absolutely
pages folded down and scribbled all over, and they take it with them on vacation and stuff like that. I mean, so when can we expect this?
It's coming out in September. I think it's September 8th.
Perfect.
Which seems like it's a long way away, but it'll be here before we know it.
Are you kidding me? I mean, when we booked this date to record, I was like, oh my God, it's so far away. It's a million years away. And now all of a sudden I was like, crap, how is it how's it spring? How's it May? I don't understand what
Yeah,
happened.
I don't understand. Time is weird now. Time is
wibbly
not
wobbly, timey
wibbly
wimey.
wobbly, timey wimey.
Wibbly
Absolutely.
wobbly, timey wimey.
Time is, I
I'm
don't know
so excited
what
about
day it
this.
is. I don't know what week it is. I don't know what month it is. But yeah,
I
I
know.
really hope. I mean, this is so cool. This is the cover, and it's
So
actually
beautiful.
it's purpler than this turned out. The color is going to be so pretty.
Yeah.
But I think it's a book that, you know, people will fall in love with and want to keep out and scribble in and.
Yeah, who wouldn't fall in love with it? I mean, it's impossible to not fall in love with you. Like, it's absolutely impossible. And
I don't know. I can give you lists of men who managed it.
Obviously, they're stupid. Okay. I mean, you are just so.
I have nothing to say about that.
You're so bubbly. You're so enjoyable, and your personality comes through in everything that you do.
Well, that's because I'm not being cranky. Ask my housemate. I have a cranky side. There is a cranky witch in here too.
Well, I see you've got a big mug there. Is it full of coffee or tea? Something caffeinated?
Actually, it's just water. It's just
really.
Water.
Yeah, I had 2 cups of coffee this morning, so my cranky.
I had 1 cup. We talked about kitchen witchery. My daily kitchen witchery is. I love mocha. I have a hot chocolate maker that is like a pitcher that you put milk in.
Yes.
And I make my 1 cup of coffee separately. And so what I do every day is I start my day with this very mindful, I pour the milk in and I think about the things that milk is good for. And I add the chocolate, like really good.
Good chocolate. So
really
you've got
good chocolate.
All that joyful, nurturing energy in the milk.
It's all like fair trade. So
yes.
I'm supporting that. And then I add my coffee and then I add like a pinch of cinnamon and a pinch of cayenne pepper and a little bit of sugar for sweetness in my life. And as I'm doing it, I focus on, you know, the energy from the pepper and things, and I froth it all together. And that, I keep meaning to meditate, but that's my meditation.
And like you said, 5 minutes, 5 minutes that it takes you to make that coffee. It is
part of my daily ritual. And it's how I know that my day is starting, you know, and
wonderful.
And then I get to drink mocha, which, you know.
I mean, that doesn't suck.
No, it
doesn't. So speaking of kitchen,
3 books.
Speaking of kitchen witchery, I'm going to ask you my last question.
Okay.
Okay. So obviously I'm a kitchen witch, wholehearted. That's what I do. And you are really familiar with my food and what I make. So this, out of everybody that I've talked to, you're like one of only a handful of people that know me on that level. So if you could have me kitchen witch wise magically make one meal for you or one dish for you, what would it be and why? Because what I'm doing is I'm compiling recipes inspired by all of my guests, and those recipes will go up on the episode so that people can make them.
So anything. I could have you make anything.
I'll saute you a cookbook. I'll saute you a phone book for you in garlic and olive oil, and you'd be happy.
No, I think maybe some kind of pasta with pesto. Because that's one of my favorite kitchen witchery things, because I love basil and sometimes I use walnuts instead of pine nuts, and I use your oils, which I am completely addicted to, but because then I can put the magic in from that oil, whichever magic it is that I feel like I need at the time. I actually like the lemon for pesto, because I put a tiny little bit of lemon in mine too. But I think if you did like a pasta dish with some kind of pesto-y thing, it would be both magical and delicious.
So like, I'm feeling like you should have tortellini or some sort of a stuffed pasta.
I eat tortellini here a lot, actually.
Really?
I don't make it from scratch, but yeah.
I don't make it from scratch.
I get it from the grocery store refrigerated section. Yeah, they have some really nice ones
with like a really nice toasted pine nut, basil pesto, but not just plain basil. I want to give you like arugula pesto and like
I
cherry.
put parsley sometimes in mine because I grow
Yes.
obscene amounts of parsley every summer.
Fresh herbs in the pesto, heavy on the basil, but you should be able to taste those other herbs. And then like cherry tomatoes
Just
for a
don't
little
use
pop.
cilantro because I hate cilantro.
You're a cilantro hater.
I am yeah, to me it tastes bitter and soapy. I'm one
Do you
of
know
the
that's genetic?
50% of people,
Yeah.
it tastes wonderful. 50% are like, oh, what is that? That's
Yeah. I love cilantro. I love cilantro and lime. I love it. But some people are like, it tastes like soap. And I had no idea.
And for me, it tastes extremely bitter. It tastes, you know, the first time I ever had it, my mother put it in a salad and I went, what's in here? What's in here? This is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Luckily, I love parsley, especially the curly parsley, which I think has a lot more flavor than the Italian. And so when a recipe calls for cilantro, I just throw in lots of it. But yeah, that would be wonderful.
That would be delicious. Oh, okay. So I'm going to come up with like a pesto recipe that's just for you.
Yay!
And that'll get posted on the show notes. And speaking of the show notes, Deborah, where can people find you online? How can they buy your books? How can they connect with you? Tell us how to find you.
Well, I do have a website, and pretty much there's links to everything else on my website. And the website is the very cleverly named DeborahBlakeAuthor.com. Really hard to find.
Really hard to remember.
Yeah, just remember that Deborah is spelled Deborah, the long biblical way. So if you can put that in, you can find me everywhere. I am on Facebook, Deborah Blake, and I'm Deborah Blake author, but it's somebody else already had that, so you have to like go searching around. I'll show up. And I'm on Twitter as Deborah Blake. I'm on Instagram as Deborah Blake author. Yeah, I have zero imagination for a writer, but I wanted to make it easy for people to find me.
We're going to put all of those links on this episode.
I have an Etsy shop with little bits and pieces of things. Yeah, well, believe it or not, I made jewelry long before I started writing books. So I have some fun jewelry, and I have signed books for the people who want the signed books, and a few magical kits, because people kept asking me for this stuff, and I finally gave in and went, yeah, alrighty.
This is great.
And I have a Patreon if people want to support me, which, you know, is greatly appreciated in these days. I do have a Deborah Blake author Patreon. So yeah, but if you go to my website, you can find all of the links, and you can see, you know, the books, and you can see, you know, if you want to learn more about any particular book, you can click on that and it'll show you stuff. And there's links there. You know, my books are basically available everywhere. The pagan books are sold. Everywhere books are sold, and a couple of places they're not. But you know, Llewellyn, you can get my pagan books directly from Llewellyn, or you can get them on Amazon or at Barnes and Nobles, or you can walk into your local independent bookstore if you have one. And if they don't have them, they can special order it, and they are usually very happy to do that. And the same with my
local bookstores.
Support your local bookstore, and you can check your library. If you don't happen to have the money to go buy a book and support this poor starving author, go to your local library, and many libraries have them. And if they don't, they can often get it through interlibrary loan, or, and this is a good thing, they'll go, oh, you're the third person who asked for this. Maybe we should order a copy for our library.
I had no idea that, you know, I think people think libraries are so underutilized. And I actually had someone reach out to me and say, I found your book at my local library, and I took it home and I cooked a recipe from it, and I loved it so much that when I returned the book to the library, I went and bought my own copy. And I was like, how great is that? You know, I mean, I don't ever think of going to the library, but it was really nice to know that people still go to libraries and still utilize their local libraries.
I grew up in a library, so my biggest problem is that I have so many author friends. I just buy their books because they're my friends, and I want to support them, and because I'm addicted to their writing, and I know I'm going to read it over again.
I agree.
But yeah, libraries are a great resource. The first thing I do when I get a new book out is I walk up the street to my local library, which is not far from where my job is, and I give them a copy so that they've got one in stock and they don't have to go out and spend their precious money.
How cool is that? Deborah Blake, you're amazing, and you are so delightful, and I am just so grateful that you decided to spend some time with me today.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. I just love hanging out with you.
I love hanging out with you too.
Closer.
I know. Well, I keep saying I'm going to all these recipes that I'm creating for everyone. I'm going to make them and have all my witch friends come here to my home when COVID is over, and we're just going to have a big
That would
giant
be
feast. And
so
Justin keeps
cool.
saying, "Stop saying that. People are just gonna start showing up, and you're just gonna have to cook for everybody." I was like, "Yeah, I know."
He says that like it's a bad thing.
I know. I know. Anyway, I can't thank you enough. This has been so much fun. Go out and find Deborah Blake online. All of the notes are going to be on the show notes for this episode, so you'll be able to find her everywhere. Click her links, buy her books, support her on Patreon. She's just the most amazing human being, as you can tell from this interview. Deborah, thank you so much for being here. And until next time, everyone, I leave you with much gratitude and so many blessings. Thanks so much for joining us.